I'm Jessica Miller, 35, and last Sunday at our family dinner in my parents' Beacon Hill home, my mother Elaine laughed and said, "No wonder you're still single at your age." Her words cut deep, especially since she had absolutely no idea that I've been secretly married to Andrew Davidson for 2 years. The complex dynamics of my family made telling them impossible, and now I'm caught between two worlds, the peaceful life I share with my husband and the charade I maintain for my parents. This double life is tearing me apart from the inside. Before I dive into why I've been hiding my marriage from my family for 2 years, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you've ever had to keep a secret to protect your happiness, and stay tuned for the full story of how I ended up living this complicated lie. Growing up in our pristine colonial home, in an affluent Boston suburb, wasn't the idyllic childhood it appeared to be from the outside. My mother, Elaine Miller, former Miss Massachusetts runner-up, built her entire identity around appearances and social connections. Every decision in our household revolved around how it would look to their country club friends, or my father's business associates. My clothes were selected not for comfort, but for the impression they made. My extracurricular activities were chosen not based on my interests, but on what would look impressive on college applications. My father, Richard Miller, was physically present but emotionally absent throughout my childhood. He worked 60-hour weeks building his financial consulting firm, and when home, he retreated behind his newspaper, or locked himself in his study. He provided financially, private schools, dance lessons, summer camps, but rarely engaged with me personally. His approach to parenting consisted mainly of nodding in agreement with whatever my mother decreed and writing checks. Then there was my younger sister, Megan. 3 years my junior, she seemed to naturally embody everything our parents valued. She was conventionally pretty, socially adept, and instinctively knew how to please our parents. While I questioned and rebelled, Megan followed the script perfectly. She attended an Ivy League school, became a corporate lawyer, married Bradley Thompson, son of one of Dad's golf buddies, and produced 2 perfectly timed grandchildren. My mother never failed to mention how Megan got it right. I was the family disappointment from an early age. I preferred art classes to debutante lessons, reading in solitude to attending society functions. When I chose to study graphic design instead of business or law, my mother didn't speak to me for weeks. "Artists don't make money," she said when she finally acknowledged my existence again. "No one respectable will want to marry a girl with paint under her fingernails." The issue of marriage became my mother's obsession as I entered my 20s. Each family gathering became an interrogation about my dating life, followed by not-so-subtle introductions to suitable men, usually the sons of my father's colleagues, or my mother's friends. These men were invariably from good families, with proper backgrounds, and respectable careers. I did try dating some of them, mostly to quiet my mother's constant criticism. There was Thomas, the investment banker, whose idea of intellectual conversation was explaining stock options to me slowly as if I were a child. Then came William, the surgeon who spoke more to my father about golf than to me during our entire 3-month relationship. None of these connections felt genuine, and they all fizzled quickly. When I did find someone I connected with, like Derek, the musician I dated at 26, my family systematically undermined the relationship. My mother accidentally forgot to invite him to family events, made cutting remarks about his career prospects, and once even tried to set me up with someone else while he was in the bathroom during a family dinner. Derek eventually tired of being treated like an unwelcome intruder, and we broke up. By 30, I'd established professional success with my own graphic design business, but in my family's eyes, I remained the failure, unmarried, childless, and pursuing a career they considered little more than a hobby. I'd learned to armor myself against their disappointment, limit my visits to obligatory holidays and the occasional Sunday dinner, and build a separate life that brought me joy. It was at 32 that I met Andrew Davidson. I was working at my usual corner table at a small coffee shop in Cambridge, rushing to finish a client project. Absorbed in my laptop, I didn't notice him until he accidentally bumped my table, causing my coffee to spill across my sketches. His mortification was so genuine as he frantically tried to help, offering his own napkins, apologizing profusely, that I couldn't even be angry. "I just destroyed your work, didn't I?" he asked, genuine distress in his eyes. "Please let me make it up to you." Andrew was tall with kind brown eyes, dark-rimmed glasses, and a slightly rumpled appearance that suggested comfort with himself rather than carelessness. When he mentioned he was an English teacher at a local high school, I could immediately picture him captivating a classroom of teenagers with discussions about Shakespeare. We talked for hours that day. He told me about growing up as the son of Ukrainian immigrants who ran a small neighborhood grocery store. He was the first in his family to go to college, working multiple jobs to put himself through school. There was no family money, no connections, no pedigree that would impress my parents, just intelligence, kindness, and a quiet confidence I found magnetic. When he asked for my number, I hesitated for only a second. I knew exactly what my mother would say about him. A teacher from an immigrant family with no social connections or substantial wealth. I knew, and in that moment, I decided I didn't care. I gave him my number anyway. After we began dating, I kept Andrew separate from my family life. I told myself it was because our relationship was new and I wanted to see where it would go before subjecting him to the Miller family scrutiny. But as weeks turned to months and our connection deepened, the truth became clearer. I was protecting what we had from the toxicity I knew my family would bring. The day Andrew spilled coffee on my designs marked the beginning of the most authentic relationship I'd ever known. After exchanging numbers, he texted that same evening to ask me to dinner the following night. We met at a small Italian restaurant tucked away on a side street in Cambridge, nothing fancy, but with homemade pasta that could make you believe in magic. Andrew arrived carrying a brand new sketchbook. "To replace the one I ruined," he said with a sheepish smile, handing it to me. "The guy at the art supply store said this was a good brand for designers." That thoughtfulness, the fact that he'd gone to a specialty store and asked questions to find the right replacement, told me volumes about who Andrew was. Our conversation flowed effortlessly as we discovered shared passions for classic literature, independent films, and hiking. Unlike other first dates, where I carefully edited myself, with Andrew I found myself sharing genuine thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. Andrew's background couldn't have been more different from mine. His parents, Diana and Michael Davidson, had emigrated from Ukraine with almost nothing when Andrew was just 3 years old. They opened a small grocery store in a working-class neighborhood and worked 14-hour days to provide for Andrew and his younger sister. They couldn't afford vacations or luxury items, but their small apartment above the store was filled with books, love, and Ukrainian home cooking. My mom would be horrified if I told you this. I admitted somewhere around our third glass of wine, but I think I'm a little jealous of your childhood. Really? No summer homes or European vacations, he teased gently. No parents who measured your worth by your social connections or marriageability, I countered. Our early dates were refreshingly simple, walking along the Charles River, exploring museum exhibits, cooking dinner together at his modest apartment. Andrew lived in a one-bedroom place filled with books and records, the furniture mismatched but comfortable. He apologized the first time he invited me over. "It's not much compared to what you're probably used to," he said. "It's perfect," I replied honestly. "It feels like a home." That was what Andrew gave me that no one else ever had, a sense of home not defined by appearances or expectations, but by comfort and acceptance. When I showed him my art portfolio, including the more experimental pieces I'd never show clients, He spent an hour asking questions and encouraging me to pursue that creative direction. "You have real talent, Jessica," he said with such genuine admiration that I blushed. "Not just technical skill, but vision. You shouldn't hide that." With Andrew's encouragement, I began creating a series of mixed media pieces exploring family dynamics and societal expectations. When Rachel, my best friend who owned a small gallery, offered to include 2 pieces in an upcoming show, Andrew took me shopping for the perfect outfit to wear to the opening, helped me frame the artwork, and stood proudly by my side all evening. When my mother called the next day and I mentioned the exhibition, her response was predictable. "That's nice, dear, but when are you going to focus on building a real career?" I didn't tell her about Andrew. Not then. I told myself the timing wasn't right, that I wanted to establish our relationship more firmly before subjecting it to my family's scrutiny. But as weeks turned to months, and I fell deeper in love with this kind, intelligent man who saw and valued the real me, the truth became harder to ignore. I was terrified my family would ruin this relationship as they had others. 6 months into dating, Andrew invited me to meet his parents. We drove to their home in Dorchester, where they still lived above the grocery store they'd owned for 30 years. Diana Davidson embraced me like a long-lost daughter the moment we walked through the door, pulling me into a kitchen that smelled of simmering borscht and freshly baked bread. "Andrew has told us so much about you," she said in her musical accent. "He says you are an artist, you must show us your work." That evening remains one of the warmest memories of my life. We squeezed around a small kitchen table as Diana served course after course of Ukrainian specialties. Michael Davidson, a bear of a man with Andrew's same kind eyes, asked thoughtful questions about my design business. They showed genuine interest in me as a person, not as a potential social asset or accomplished breeder of grandchildren. After dinner, Andrew's father pulled out a battered chess set, and we played games while drinking homemade berry liqueur. When Andrew mentioned my upcoming art exhibition, they immediately marked the date on their calendar hanging on the refrigerator, insisting they would be there. "Family supports family," Michael said simply. Driving home that night, I realized I was crying. "What's wrong?" Andrew asked, alarmed. "Nothing's wrong," I said. "That's just it. Nothing was wrong. They are wonderful." "Did you think they wouldn't be?" he asked, confused. How could I explain that I'd expected the kind of judgment and evaluation my own parents subjected every boyfriend to? That I was waiting for the subtle undermining, the critical questions, the cold assessment of suitability that never came. As our 1-year anniversary approached, I knew with absolute certainty that I wanted to spend my life with Andrew. What I didn't know was how to integrate this relationship into my family life. I'd maintained the separation for so long that introducing him now would require explanations I wasn't prepared to give. So I continued the compartmentalization. Andrew was my real life, my happy place, while family dinners and holiday gatherings remained performances where I played the role of still single daughter. Andrew proposed on our anniversary. He didn't do it at an expensive restaurant or with a flashy display. Instead, after a day spent hiking our favorite trail, he got down on one knee at the summit overlooking the autumn foliage and presented a modest but beautiful ring. "I can't offer you wealth or social status," he said, his voice slightly shaky. "But I can promise to love you for exactly who you are for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me?" I said yes immediately, tears streaming down my face, my heart so full it felt like it might burst. The euphoria lasted until we began hiking back down the mountain, when reality began to set in. Telling my family about our engagement would mean admitting I'd been hiding Andrew from them for a year. It would mean watching my mother's face fall when she learned he was a teacher from a working-class immigrant family. It would mean subjecting Andrew to their judgment and probably their attempts to dissuade me from marrying him. That night, lying in bed in Andrew's apartment, I confessed my fears. I don't know how to tell them, Andrew. You don't understand what they are like. So don't tell them yet, he said simply, stroking my hair. We don't need to rush anything. You'd be okay with that? With keeping our engagement private for a while. Jessica, I'm marrying you, not your family. We'll figure it out together, whatever way makes you feel safe and happy. His understanding should have comforted me, but instead it filled me with shame. Andrew deserved better than to be my secret. But the alternative, potentially losing him due to my family's interference, was unthinkable. So we reached a compromise. We would tell his family, who were thrilled, and my best friend Rachel, who screamed with joy when I showed her the ring, but keep the news from my parents until we figured out the right approach. I never found that approach. Weeks stretched into months, and the right moment never presented itself. Every Sunday dinner with my parents reaffirmed my fear, as my mother made cutting remarks about my perpetual singlehood, and my father nodded along. I began wearing my engagement ring on a chain under my clothes when I visited them, putting it back on my finger with relief the moment I left. After 6 months of engagement, Andrew and I found ourselves facing a difficult truth. There would never be a right time to tell my family. Every scenario I imagined ended with drama, rejection, and potentially losing the beautiful relationship we'd built. We discussed postponing the wedding until I found the courage to confront my family, but that felt like allowing their toxicity to control yet another aspect of my life. One evening, as we walked along the beach at sunset during a weekend getaway to Cape Cod, Andrew stopped and turned to me. "What if we just got married?" he asked. "Not a big production, not a social event, just us, making our commitment to each other." "You mean elope?" "Not exactly eloping. We could have a small ceremony with the people who truly support us, my family, Rachel, anyone else who matters to you. The people who love us for who we are." The idea took root immediately. A wedding that wasn't about impressing others or meeting social expectations, but simply celebrating our love with those who genuinely cared about us. It felt right in a way nothing about my family's vision of a wedding ever had. We planned our ceremony for early October at a small, secluded beach on the North Shore that had special meaning for us. I asked Rachel to be my witness, while Andrew's sister stood up for him. Diana Davidson helped me find a simple, but beautiful white dress that made me feel more like myself than any of the elaborate gowns my mother would have insisted upon. Andrew's father, surprisingly artistic, crafted our wedding bands from silver. The morning of our wedding dawned clear and crisp, with that perfect autumn light that turns everything golden. We gathered on the beach, Andrew's parents and sister, his grandmother who'd flown in from Ukraine, Rachel, and 2 close friends from Andrew's teaching job. 9 people in total, standing in a small semicircle on the sand. We wrote our own vows, promises that spoke to who we truly were and what we genuinely valued. When Andrew placed the handmade ring on my finger, his hands were steady and his eyes certain. For the first time in my life, I felt completely seen and accepted. "I take you, Jessica, exactly as you are," he said. "Your creativity, your strength, your kind heart, these are the treasures I'll cherish for all our days." Diana had prepared a small feast for our reception, held at a rented cottage nearby. We danced to music played on Michael's old record player, drank champagne from mismatched glasses, and ate homemade Ukrainian wedding cake. It was nothing like the elaborate society wedding my mother would have orchestrated, with hundreds of guests I barely knew, but it was perfect in every way that mattered. Except for the absence that hung over the day like a shadow. As happy as I was, I couldn't completely silence the voice that whispered I should have found a way to have my parents and sister there. When Diana hugged me and welcomed me to the family, tears in her eyes, I felt the acute pain of knowing my own mother was unaware her daughter was getting married that day. "Your parents would be proud," Diana said, meaning it as comfort. I didn't have the heart to correct her assumption that my parents had passed away, the explanation Andrew had given when questioned about their absence. The truth was too complicated, too shameful to share on this joyful day. Our honeymoon was a 5-day trip to a cozy inn in Vermont, where we hiked through fall foliage, drank local cider, and spent long evenings by the fireplace planning our future. I told my family I was at a graphic design conference in Chicago, sending a carefully staged photo of myself in front of a generic hotel backdrop that Rachel had taken before we left for Vermont. My mother replied only to point out that my hair looked messy, and I should have worn a different blouse for a professional event. Returning to real life meant returning to our deception. We moved Andrew's belongings into my apartment, creating our first home together. His books intermingled with mine on the shelves, his coffee mug sat beside mine on the counter each morning, his warm body curled around mine each night. Our daily life was blissfully normal. We cooked dinner together, shared the Sunday crossword puzzle, planned weekend outings, except for the elaborate precautions we took to maintain my family's ignorance. I became meticulous about hiding evidence of our marriage before any family visits. Wedding photos were stored in a locked drawer. Andrew's clothes and personal items were temporarily moved to designated hiding spots. His name was removed from our mailbox. I wore my ring on the chain around my neck, hidden beneath my clothing, at every family function. Social media required particular vigilance. I maintained strictly separate accounts, one with my married name where I could be myself, visible only to trusted friends, and another with my maiden name, where I carefully curated an image of single professional life for family and their connections to see. Andrew understood this charade was painful for me, but it hurt him too, especially when he had to miss family gatherings or holidays, because I was supposedly single and attending alone. The hardest moment came 3 months after our wedding, when Andrew's school held a faculty Christmas party. As a teacher's spouse, I should have been by his side, meeting his colleagues and celebrating together. Instead, he attended alone, because I couldn't risk photos appearing that my family might somehow see. When he returned home that night, the hurt in his eyes was unmistakable, though he tried to hide it. "It's fine," he insisted when I apologized. We knew this would be complicated. But it wasn't fine. We were denying the legitimacy of our commitment to preserve a relationship with people who couldn't accept me for who I was. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was lying to people who didn't truly love me in order to avoid losing their conditional affection, while hurting someone who loved me unconditionally in the process. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to end the deception. The thought of my mother's reaction, my father's disappointment, potentially being cut off from my family entirely, it paralyzed me with fear. So our double life continued, becoming more elaborate and more painful with each passing month. By our first wedding anniversary, maintaining our secret marriage had become a part-time job. I kept a detailed calendar of when I mentioned Andrew's existence to which friends, developed coded language with Rachel for discussing my marital status in potentially mixed company, and maintained separate sets of everything from social media accounts to holiday cards. The most challenging aspect was the Sunday family dinners my mother still insisted upon. Once a month, I would drive to my parents' Beacon Hill home alone, having kissed Andrew goodbye with promises to text when I left. These dinners followed a predictable pattern. My mother would interrogate me about my business, find it lacking, then transition to my romantic prospects, or apparent lack thereof. "Jessica, did you see that Amelia Robertson's daughter just got engaged? And she's only 27, my mother said during one such dinner, delicately cutting her roast chicken. "That's nice," I replied non-committally. "The Lewis boy, you remember him, his father is on the hospital board with your father, he just made partner at his law firm. Still single, I hear." "I'm not interested, Mom. You can't afford to be so picky at your age, Jessica. Your options aren't getting better." I would sit through these conversations, a wedding ring hanging between my breasts on a chain, thinking about Andrew waiting at home, our home, with takeout and a movie, ready to help me decompress from the ordeal. There were countless close calls. Like the time my sister Megan dropped by my apartment unexpectedly while Andrew was there. He had to hide in the bedroom closet for 4 to 5 minutes while she vented about an argument with her husband. Or when my mother called while Andrew and I were shopping for a new couch, and I had to pretend I was alone at a client meeting. "Who are you talking to?" my mother had asked suspiciously, hearing the salesperson address both of us. "Just the barista," I lied smoothly. "I'm working from the coffee shop today." The lies multiplied and intertwined until keeping track of them became exhausting. I told my family I was traveling for work when we visited Andrew's parents for holidays. I invented a fictional female roommate to explain certain masculine items my mother might notice in my apartment. I blamed my distracted behavior at family events on work stress rather than the mental gymnastics required to maintain my deception. 6 months into our marriage, my sister started to suspect something. Always more perceptive than our parents, Megan noticed subtle changes in my behavior and appearance. "You seem different lately," she commented over lunch one day. "More settled somehow. And you're wearing jewelry now." She pointed to a necklace Andrew had given me. "Just trying to look more professional for clients," I deflected. "And you keep checking your phone and smiling at texts. Are you seeing someone you're not telling us about?" For a moment, I considered confessing everything to Megan. Unlike our parents, she had occasionally shown glimpses of independent thinking. But then I remembered how quickly she'd sided with our mother during past family conflicts, how she'd internalized the family values of status and appearances. "Just a group chat with Rachel and some other friends," I lied instead. The weight of these deceptions affected both Andrew and me. I became jumpy and anxious, constantly fearing exposure. Andrew grew increasingly frustrated with being erased from half of my life, especially as his own family fully embraced me as a daughter-in-law. His parents called regularly, sent care packages, invited us for Sunday dinners where I was treated as family without qualification or condition. "They're asking when we'll visit with your parents," Andrew told me one evening, after hanging up from a call with his mother. "They want to meet them, Jessica. They don't understand why the families haven't been introduced." "What did you tell them?" "The same thing I always tell them, that your relationship with your family is complicated. But they don't really understand keeping families separate after marriage. In their culture, families merge." The contrast between the Davidson family's warmth and my own family's conditional acceptance became more painful with each passing month. Andrew's parents sent us an anniversary card, with a heartfelt message about the joy of seeing their son so happy. That same week, my mother sent me a newspaper clipping about increasing divorce rates among women who marry after 35, a not-so-subtle commentary on what she perceived as my spinsterhood. Andrew's patience, while extraordinary, wasn't infinite. 9 months into our marriage, after I fabricated a work emergency to explain missing his department's end-of-year celebration, he finally voiced his growing frustration. "I understand this is difficult for you," he said carefully, sitting at our kitchen table late that night. "But I feel like I'm your shameful secret, Jessica. Like you're ashamed of me." "That's not it at all," I protested, tears welling up. "I'm ashamed of them, of how they'll treat you. I'm protecting you." "Are you sure that's all it is? Because sometimes it feels like you're protecting your place in their world, even though that world makes you miserable." His words struck a nerve, because they contained a grain of truth. Despite everything, some part of me still craved my parents' approval, still hoped for my mother to genuinely accept me. And maintaining the secret allowed me to preserve that possibility, however slim. "I need you to understand that this can't go on forever," Andrew continued gently. I'm not asking for an ultimatum or a timeline, but I need to know that you don't plan to live this way for the rest of our lives. I promised him I didn't, that I was working toward finding the courage to tell my family. But privately, I couldn't imagine how or when that revelation would occur. Every family gathering reinforced my conviction that they would never accept Andrew, never see his value beyond his modest income and lack of social credentials. As our second wedding anniversary approached, the strain of our double life intensified. Andrew's family wanted to host a celebration dinner. My family still had no idea I was married. The web of lies had grown so complex that I sometimes caught myself forgetting which version of my life I was supposed to be presenting in which context. Rachel, my one confidant besides Andrew, finally confronted me after watching me change from my wedding ring to a ringless single persona before meeting my mother for lunch. "This is destroying you, Jess," she said bluntly. "You're living half a life, because you're afraid of your family's reaction. But here's the thing, their reaction is going to be the same whether you tell them now or 5 years from now. The only difference is how much more time you'll waste living in fear." She was right, but knowing something intellectually and finding the courage to act on it are entirely different matters. I continued the balancing act, growing more exhausted and resentful with each performance. "No wonder you're still single at your age," my mother said at yet another Sunday dinner, laughing lightly as if her comment was merely an observation rather than a judgment. "You're too set in your ways now." I nodded and smiled tightly, the chain around my neck suddenly feeling like it was choking me. How much longer could I keep this up? The Sunday dinner that finally broke me happened just after our second wedding anniversary. Andrew and I had celebrated quietly the night before with a homemade dinner and exchanging of heartfelt cards, careful not to post anything on social media. The next day, I drove to my parents' house alone as usual, mentally arming myself for the familiar performance. The evening started typically enough. My father retreated to his study until dinner was served. My mother fussed over Megan's children while delivering subtle criticisms disguised as helpful suggestions. Megan talked about her recent promotion at the law firm. I answered questions about my design business with carefully edited responses that wouldn't reveal any connection to Andrew or our shared life. It was during the main course, my mother's famous roast beef, that she knew I didn't particularly enjoy, but continued to serve whenever I visited, that the conversation took its predictable turn toward my personal life. "Did I mention that Catherine Whitmore's daughter just got engaged?" my mother said, refilling her wine glass. "That's all 3 of her girls married before 30. I don't know how she managed it. Probably by not criticizing them constantly," I muttered, too quietly for anyone to hear. "Jessica, do you remember Dr. Harrison?" My father unexpectedly joined the conversation. His son just moved back to Boston, after making quite a name for himself in corporate law in New York. Divorced, I believe, but no children. I ran into him at the club last week. "I'm not interested in being set up, Dad," I said more firmly. "You can't afford to be so choosy anymore, dear," my mother interjected with a tight smile. 35 isn't 25. Men want younger women if they're looking to start families. I stabbed at my roast beef, saying nothing. "I've never understood why you're so resistant to meeting nice men from good families," she continued, her voice taking on the familiar disappointed tone I'd heard my entire life. "Is it some kind of rebellion? Are you still trying to prove something?" "I'm not trying to prove anything, Mom. I'm just living my life." "Living your life," she echoed with a small, dismissive laugh. "And what does that entail exactly? Working on your little design projects? Living in that cramped apartment? No husband, no children, no real security." Each word landed like a physical blow. I thought about our apartment, not cramped at all, but cozy and filled with love, with Andrew's books and my art and the life we were building together. I thought about the security I felt in his arms each night, worth more than any trust fund or country club membership. "Mom, maybe ease up a bit," Megan said, surprising me with this small defense. "I'm just concerned," my mother replied, not easing up at all. "Jessica has always been different. Difficult. I worry about her ending up alone." "I'm sitting right here," I reminded her, my voice tight. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. I'm your mother. If I don't tell you the truth, who will? The fact is, something must be wrong if you're still single at 35. No wonder you haven't found anyone. You've always been too stubborn for your own good." She laughed again, that light, social laugh that was meant to take the sting out of her words, but only made them more painful. "No wonder you're still single at your age." In that moment, something inside me snapped. 2 years of deception, of denying my marriage, of erasing Andrew from conversations, of pretending to be someone I wasn't, it all crashed down on me with unbearable weight. I stood up abruptly, my napkin falling to the floor. "I need to go," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Jessica, don't be dramatic," my mother sighed. "Sit down and finish your dinner." "No. I'm going home." "This behavior is exactly what I'm talking about," my mother continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Men don't want women who make scenes. Now, I was talking to Caroline yesterday, and her nephew is visiting from Chicago next month. He's a surgeon and—" "Stop it." The words exploded from me with such force that everyone at the table froze. "Just stop it. I don't want to meet Caroline's nephew or Dr. Harrison's son, or anyone else you try to throw at me. I'm done with this." My mother's face registered shock, then quickly rearranged itself into wounded dignity. "There's no need for that tone, Jessica. I'm only trying to help you." "You're not trying to help me. You're trying to fix me, because in your mind I'm broken. Because I don't fit your idea of what a daughter should be." "That's not fair," my father finally spoke up, his voice stern. "Your mother only wants what's best for you." "What's best for me according to who? You've never once asked what would actually make me happy." "We've given you everything," my mother said, her voice rising. "The best education, opportunities, connections. And what have you done with them? You're 35 with a hobby you call a business, living alone, no prospects." "I'm married." The words burst out before I could stop them, hanging in the suddenly silent dining room. My mother froze with her wineglass halfway to her lips. My father's fork clattered against his plate. Megan's eyes widened to perfect circles. "What did you say?" my mother finally asked, her voice dangerously quiet. There was no taking it back now. 2 years of secrecy ended with those 2 impulsive words. I took a deep breath, feeling strangely calm now that the moment had arrived. "I'm married. I have been for 2 years. "That's not possible," my mother said dismissively. "You're confused." "I'm not confused. I'm married to a wonderful man named Andrew Davidson. He's a high school English teacher. We got married 2 years ago on the beach with his family present." "This isn't funny, Jessica," my father warned. "It's not a joke." I reached under my blouse and pulled out my wedding ring on its chain. "This is my wedding ring. I wear it around my neck when I come here, because I've been too afraid to tell you the truth." My mother stared at the ring as if it were a snake about to strike. "Why would you do something like this? Get married without telling us? Who is this person you claim to have married?" "His name is Andrew. I've been with him for 3 years. He's kind and brilliant, and he loves me exactly as I am." What kind of man marries a woman in secret? Without meeting her family? He must be after something, your money, or... He's not after anything, Mom. We kept our marriage secret, because I knew exactly how you would react, exactly as you're reacting right now. You'd never accept him, because he doesn't fit your narrow definition of acceptable. Is he at least from a good family? My mother asked desperately. He's from a loving family. His parents are Ukrainian immigrants who own a small grocery store. They've welcomed me without judgment or conditions. My mother's face crumpled in genuine horror, as if I'd described marrying a convicted felon. Oh, Jessica. What have you done? I've married someone who makes me happy. Who sees me for who I really am and loves me anyway. This is ridiculous, my father cut in. You can't possibly expect us to accept this situation. A secret marriage to someone we've never met, from that kind of background. That's exactly why it was a secret, I said quietly, gathering my purse and standing up. I'm going home now. To my husband. Jessica, wait, Megan called as I headed for the door. We should talk about this. But I was already walking out, tears streaming down my face, feeling simultaneously terrible and relieved. The truth was out, for better or worse. I called Andrew from the car. I told them, I said when he answered, my voice shaky. It just came out. I couldn't take it anymore. I'll be waiting for you, he said simply. We'll face whatever comes next together. When I arrived home, our home, Andrew was waiting with open arms, holding me as I sobbed out the whole awful scene. I've ruined everything, I cried against his shoulder. No, he said firmly, stroking my hair. You've finally started being honest. That's never the wrong thing to do. That night, lying in bed with Andrew's arms around me, I realized we had reached the point of no return. My family knew the truth now, and whatever happened next would determine the shape of our future. I felt terrified, but also strangely free, as if a burden I'd been carrying for years had finally been set down. What do we do now? I whispered into the darkness. Now, Andrew replied, we stop hiding. The first 24 hours after my confession passed in eerie silence. No calls from my parents, no texts from Megan. It was as if I'd vanished from the family consciousness. I vacillated between relief at the reprieve and anxiety about the inevitable confrontation to come. They're regrouping, I told Andrew as we ate breakfast the morning after my outburst. My mother is probably planning her strategy right now. Sure enough, late that afternoon, my phone lit up with a text from Megan, Mom and Dad want to meet him. They're coming to your apartment tomorrow at 2. Don't argue, just say yes. Trying to help. I showed the message to Andrew, my stomach churning with anxiety. They're coming here. To our home. Maybe that's good, he suggested cautiously. They'll see how we live, that we're happy together. Or they'll walk in and immediately start judging everything from our furniture to your job. Despite my reservations, I replied to Megan with a simple okay, then spent the next 24 hours in a cleaning frenzy. I wanted our apartment to be immaculate, as if a spotless home could somehow compensate for what my parents would perceive as my marital shortcomings. Andrew watched my anxious preparations with growing concern. Jessica, we need to talk about how we're going to handle tomorrow, he said gently that evening, taking the disinfectant wipes from my hands to make me stop cleaning. What are your expectations? What are you hoping will happen? I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. I don't know. Best case scenario. They meet you, see how amazing you are, and realize their prejudices were unfounded. And realistically, I sighed. They'll be cold and judgmental, ask invasive questions about your finances and background, and try to find ways to undermine our relationship. Andrew sat beside me, taking my hands in his. Then we need to be united. We need to decide what we're willing to accept from them and what we aren't. We spent hours that night establishing boundaries and preparing for different scenarios. Andrew promised to be respectful, but not deferential, to extend olive branches without compromising his dignity. I promised to stand by him, not allowing my parents to drive wedges between us. No matter what happens tomorrow, he said before we went to sleep, remember that we're a family too. You and me. The next day, at precisely 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, squeezed Andrew's hand, and opened the door to find my parents and Megan standing in the hallway. My mother's face was a mask of rigid control, my father looked uncomfortable, and Megan offered a small, encouraging smile. Please come in, I said, stepping back to allow them entry. They filed into our living room, my mother's eyes immediately scanning every surface, every piece of furniture, making mental notes and judgments I could practically hear. Andrew stepped forward, extending his hand first to my father. Mr. Miller, I'm Andrew Davidson. It's good to finally meet you. My father hesitated a fraction of a second before shaking Andrew's hand briefly. Richard, he said curtly. Mrs. Miller, Andrew turned to my mother, still holding out his hand. Thank you for coming today. My mother looked at his offered hand as if it might contaminate her before briefly touching it. It's Elaine, she said, her voice chilly. Megan, to her credit, gave Andrew a genuine handshake and smile. I'm Megan, Jessica's sister. Nice to meet you. Can I offer anyone something to drink? I asked, my hostess' voice sounding strained even to my own ears. Coffee? Tea? Water? Water would be fine, my mother replied, seating herself primly on the edge of our couch, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. As I escaped to the kitchen, I could hear Andrew making a valiant attempt at small talk, asking my father about his golf game based on information I'd shared with him. My father's responses were monosyllabic. I returned with a tray of waters and a plate of cookies Andrew had baked that morning, setting them on the coffee table. No one reached for either. So, my mother finally broke the uncomfortable silence. Jessica tells us you're a teacher. Yes, I teach English at Cambridge Prep, Andrew confirmed. I've been there for 7 years now. And that's fulfilling for you, she asked, her tone suggesting she couldn't imagine how it possibly could be. Very much so, Andrew replied evenly. Helping young people discover literature and develop critical thinking skills is incredibly rewarding. I'm sure, she said dismissively, before turning to me. Jessica, perhaps you could explain to us why you felt it necessary to get married in secret. Do you have any idea how humiliating it is to have your daughter hide her own wedding from you? And there it was, making it about her feelings, her humiliation. Mom, We both made that decision, Andrew interrupted gently but firmly. We realized it might be difficult for you to accept our relationship, given our different backgrounds, and we wanted to establish our marriage on our own terms. Different backgrounds, my mother repeated icily. Yes, I suppose that's one way to put it. Mrs. Miller, Elaine, I understand this is a shock to you, Andrew continued. But I love your daughter very much, and I'm committed to building a good life with her. What kind of life can you offer her? Teaching is a noble profession, I suppose, but the financial realities. Mom, stop, I interrupted. I don't need Andrew to offer me a certain kind of life. We're building one together that makes us both happy. You say that now, she persisted. But what about when you want children? When you need a larger home? Jessica was raised with certain advantages. Which I appreciate, I cut in, but material advantages aren't everything. Andrew and I are doing fine financially. My business is successful, his position is secure. We're not struggling. Not struggling by whose standards, my father finally spoke up. You could have married someone who could give you so much more. I married someone who gives me what I actually need, I said firmly. Respect. Support. Love without conditions. My mother's face flushed. And we haven't loved you. After everything we've done for you. You've loved a version of me that doesn't exist, I said quietly. You've never really seen me for who I am or what I want. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Megan, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke. I'd like to know how you two met, she said to Andrew. Jessica hasn't told us anything. Andrew shared the story of our coffee shop meeting, his eyes warming as he described how captivated he'd been by me from the first conversation. For a brief moment, the tension in the room eased slightly. And your family? My mother couldn't resist asking. What do they think of this arrangement? My parents are thrilled, Andrew replied honestly. They've welcomed Jessica as a daughter. They were at our wedding, along with my sister and grandmother. The reminder that his family had been included while mine had been excluded caused my mother's face to harden again. I see. Well, isn't that nice, she said, her voice brittle. Strangers at my daughter's wedding, while her own mother was kept in the dark. Mom, please try to understand, I began. Understand what exactly, she demanded. That you've lied to us for years. That you married this person without even giving us a chance to be part of it. That you've chosen his family over your own. I didn't choose anyone over anyone else, I protested. I was trying to protect my relationship from exactly this kind of reaction. So this is our fault, my father asked incredulously. We're to blame for your deception. No, that's not what Jessica has told me many times how much she values family, Andrew intervened. She's been torn about this situation. We both hope that now that everything is in the open, we can find a way forward that brings our families together rather than keeping them apart. My mother looked at him as if he'd suggested something obscene. Brings our families together? Mr. Davidson, I don't mean to be unkind, but surely you understand the differences here. The only difference that matters, I said, my voice stronger now, is that Andrew's family accepted me immediately and completely, while you're sitting here suggesting he's not good enough, because his parents weren't born with silver spoons in their mouths. Jessica, my father warned. No, I'm done tiptoeing around this, I continued. I've spent my entire life trying to meet impossible standards, feeling like a failure, because I wanted different things than you did. I'm 35 years old. I'm married to a man I love who treats me with respect and kindness. I run a successful business doing work that fulfills me. I'm happy. Why isn't that enough for you? Because we want what's best for you, my mother exclaimed. This is what's best for me, I said, reaching for Andrew's hand. He is what's best for me. My mother looked at our joined hands, her expression a mixture of disbelief and disappointment. I think we've seen enough, she said, standing abruptly. Richard, we're leaving. My father stood immediately. Megan hesitated, looking torn. So that's it? I asked, also rising. You're not even going to try to get to know him? Jessica, you've made your choice very clear, my mother said coldly. You chose to marry this man in secret, to lie to your family for years, to exclude us from your life. Now you'll have to live with those choices. Mom, don't do this, I pleaded, feeling tears welling up despite my determination to stay strong. What exactly did you expect? She asked. That we would celebrate being deceived. That we would welcome this situation with open arms. You've shown us exactly how much you value family, Jessica. Message received. She moved toward the door, my father following silently. Megan hesitated, looking back at me with conflicted eyes. Megan, my mother called sharply. I'll catch up, Megan said unexpectedly. I want to talk to Jessica for a minute. My mother's lips thinned to a disapproving line, but she didn't argue, sweeping out of the apartment with my father in tow. The door closed behind them with a definitive click. As soon as they were gone, I collapsed onto the couch, the tears I'd been holding back finally spilling over. Andrew sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders. I'm sorry, he murmured. I'm so sorry it went that way. Megan remained standing, looking around our apartment with new eyes. So this is your real life, she said quietly. This is where you've been all this time, when you said you were working late, or traveling for business. I nodded, wiping at my tears. I'm sorry for lying to you, Megan. To my surprise, she sat down on my other side. I get it. I think I get it more than you realize. She looked at Andrew. It's nice to meet you. For real this time. You too, he said, offering a small smile. They might come around, Megan offered, though her tone suggested she didn't entirely believe it. They just need time to process. They won't come around, I said, surprising myself with how certain I felt. Not unless Andrew suddenly transforms into a hedge fund manager, with a yacht and a summer home in Nantucket. Give them a little credit, Megan protested. They love you. They love who they want me to be, I corrected. Not who I am. Megan stayed for another hour, asking questions about our relationship and wedding, looking at photos we could finally show her. When she left, she hugged me tightly. I wish I'd been there, she whispered. At your wedding. You look so happy in the pictures. I was. I am. After she left, Andrew and I sat in stunned silence, processing the confrontation. What now? He finally asked. Now we wait, I guess. See if they reach out. And if they don't. I leaned my head against his shoulder, feeling drained, but also oddly peaceful. Then we keep living our life. Our real life. Together. In that moment, despite the pain of my parents' rejection, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. No more secrets, no more lies, no more double life. Whatever came next, we would face it honestly, as ourselves, together. The days immediately following my parents' dramatic exit from our apartment were filled with a strange mixture of grief and relief. I mourned the family acceptance I'd hoped for, but never truly expected, while simultaneously feeling liberated from the exhausting deception I'd maintained for so long. It's like I've been holding my breath for 2 years, I told Andrew one evening as we sat on our tiny balcony, watching the sunset. And even though the outcome was painful, at least now I can breathe. Andrew had been my rock throughout the ordeal, never once saying, I told you so, or blaming me for the years of secrecy that had led to this painful confrontation. Instead, he focused on helping me rebuild and move forward. What do you need right now? He would ask each morning, as I navigated the unfamiliar territory of being officially estranged from my parents. Sometimes what I needed was distraction, working on a challenging design project, or taking a weekend hiking trip. Other times, I needed to cry and rage about the unfairness of being rejected for choosing happiness on my own terms. Andrew held space for all of it. My mother maintained radio silence, not responding to the tentative text messages I sent in the first few weeks. My father, predictably, followed her lead. Only Megan maintained contact, calling regularly and even meeting us for dinner occasionally, getting to know Andrew properly for the first time. They talk about you, she admitted during one such dinner, about a month after the confrontation. Mom pretends you don't exist when other people are around, but I've heard her crying in her room. Is that supposed to make me feel guilty? I asked, more sharply than I intended. No, Megan said thoughtfully. I think it's supposed to make her feel better. Like she's the wronged party in all this. Megan's perspective on our family dynamics had begun to shift subtly since learning about my secret marriage. As she spent time with Andrew and me, seeing our genuine connection and happiness, she started questioning the rigid values she'd always accepted without thought. Did you ever wonder if maybe Mom's ideas about what makes a good life aren't actually the only way to be happy? She asked during one of our sister lunches, about 2 months into the estrangement. Only my entire life, I replied dryly. She laughed, then grew serious. I think I'm having my first midlife crisis at 32. Watching you be so happy with Andrew, in a life that doesn't check any of the boxes Mom and Dad set out for us, it's making me question some things. Like what? Like whether I actually wanted to be a corporate lawyer, or if I just did it to please Dad. Like whether Bradley and I got married because we love each other or because we looked good on paper together. She traced the condensation on her water glass thoughtfully. Don't get me wrong. I love my kids more than anything. But some days I wonder who I'd be if I'd made choices based on what I wanted instead of what was expected. These conversations with Megan became an unexpected bright spot in an otherwise difficult period. For the first time, we were relating to each other as adults with independent thoughts rather than as competitors in our parents' approval Olympics. Meanwhile, Andrew's family continued to be a source of warmth and acceptance. Diana called weekly with recipes and family news. Michael sent handwritten letters with clippings from Ukrainian newspapers he thought might interest us. They never pressured us about the situation with my family, simply offering steady support and occasional words of wisdom. Families are complicated, Diana told me during one phone call. In Ukraine, we have saying, the tree grows new branches, but the roots remain. Your parents may need time, but blood does not forget blood easily. As summer turned to fall, I threw myself into therapy, finally addressing the deeply rooted issues that had led me to hide such a significant part of my life for so long. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, helped me understand that my tendency to compartmentalize stemmed from growing up in a household where conditional love was the norm. You learned early that parts of yourself weren't acceptable, she explained, during one particularly illuminating session. So you developed the ability to hide those parts away, to present only what would be approved of. Your secret marriage was an extreme version of a coping mechanism you've been using your whole life. Working through these issues was painful but necessary. I began to recognize patterns of people-pleasing and conflict avoidance that had shaped not just my relationship with my parents, but also friendships and professional relationships. Slowly, I started practicing authenticity in all areas of my life, speaking up in client meetings when I disagreed with a direction, being honest with friends about my feelings, no longer pretending to enjoy activities I disliked just to fit in. Andrew noticed the change in me. You seem more present, he observed one evening, 6 months into our estrangement from my parents. More comfortable in your own skin. I was about to respond when my phone rang. Looking down, I was shocked to see my father's name on the screen. With a racing heart, I answered. Dad? Jessica. His voice sounded older, more hesitant than I remembered. I was wondering if you might be available for coffee tomorrow. Just you? I asked cautiously. Just me, he confirmed. Your mother doesn't know I'm calling. We arranged to meet at a neutral coffee shop halfway between our homes. When I told Andrew, he immediately offered to come with me. I think I need to do this alone, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Whatever he wants to say, I need to hear it without worrying about how you're feeling in the moment. Andrew nodded, understanding as always. Just remember that you don't have to accept anything that doesn't feel right, even if he's trying to reconcile. The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop early, claiming a quiet table in the corner and ordering a latte to calm my nerves. When my father walked in, I was struck by how much older he looked after just 6 months, his shoulders slightly stooped, new lines around his eyes. He ordered a black coffee and sat across from me, his hands fidgeting with the cardboard sleeve around his cup. "You look well," he said finally. "Thanks. I am well." He nodded, seeming unsure how to continue. My father had never been good with emotional conversations. That had always been my mother's domain, for better or worse. "Your mother is still very hurt," he began. "I understand that," I said carefully. "I'm hurt too." He looked surprised, as if it hadn't occurred to him that I might also be nursing wounds from our confrontation. "Jessica, I don't approve of how you handled this situation," he said, his voice firmer now. "Keeping secrets, getting married without telling us, that wasn't right." I waited, expecting more criticism, but to my surprise, he continued in a different direction. "But I've been thinking about why you felt you needed to do that. And I've been wondering if maybe your mother and I played a role in creating a situation where you didn't feel you could be honest with us." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. In 35 years, I had never heard my father take responsibility for any family dysfunction. "You did," I said finally, my voice quiet but steady. "You and Mom made it very clear what kind of life choices were acceptable. Anything outside those parameters was met with disapproval or outright rejection." He flinched slightly but nodded. "Your sister has been vocal about her perspective lately. She made me realize some things about how we've treated you over the years." We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering ground we'd never explored before. My father shared how his own parents had imposed rigid expectations on him, how he'd never questioned whether those same expectations were fair to pass on to his daughters. I told him about the pain of feeling like the family disappointment, of hiding my true self to gain crumbs of approval. "I'd like to meet him," my father said eventually. "Your husband. Properly this time, without your mother's influence." "I'd like that," I said cautiously. "But Andrew is my family now, Dad. I need to know you'll treat him with respect, regardless of his background or career." "I can't promise I'll understand all your choices," he said honestly. "But I can promise to try." That coffee meeting marked the beginning of a slow, difficult reconciliation process. My father met Andrew for dinner the following week, making a genuine effort to know the man his daughter had chosen. Andrew, generous as always, met my father's awkward attempts at connection with warmth and openness. My mother remained resolute in her disapproval for several more months. It was a heart attack scare, minor but frightening, that finally broke the stalemate. As she recovered in the hospital, I set aside my hurt and showed up to support her. Seeing me at her bedside day after day, witnessing my genuine concern despite our estrangement, seemed to soften something in her. "I don't understand the choices you've made," she told me during her recovery. "I don't think I ever will. But you're my daughter, and I don't want to lose you completely." It wasn't the wholehearted acceptance I might have once hoped for, but it was a beginning. We established a tentative truce, agreeing to avoid certain topics and focus on rebuilding some semblance of relationship. The first time Andrew came to my parents' house for a holiday dinner, the atmosphere was tense but civil. My mother made an effort to include him in conversation, though her questions often revealed her lingering prejudices. Andrew handled it all with grace, neither apologizing for who he was nor responding to subtle digs with anything but polite warmth. "You're a better person than I am," I told him on the drive home. I wanted to scream every time she mentioned her friend's son, the investment banker. "I'm not threatened by investment bankers," he said with a small smile. I'm married to you. I've already won. By our third wedding anniversary, the first one we could celebrate openly, we had settled into a new normal. My relationship with my parents would never be what it had been, but in many ways, it had become more honest. The painful revelation of my secret marriage had forced us to confront the dysfunctional patterns we'd been enacting for decades. My mother still occasionally made comments that revealed her disappointment with my life choices, but I had developed the strength to let those comments slide off me rather than internalize them as I once would have. My father had become surprisingly supportive, even attending an exhibition of my artwork and asking thoughtful questions about my creative process. Most surprisingly, Megan had become our strongest ally, frequently visiting our apartment with her children and including Andrew in family events even when our parents were hesitant. She confided that watching me stand up for my authentic life had inspired her to make some changes in her own, including scaling back her work hours to pursue a long-abandoned interest in photography. On the evening of our anniversary, Andrew and I sat on our balcony again, drinking champagne and reflecting on the tumultuous journey of the past year. If you could go back, would you do anything differently? Andrew asked, his hand warm in mine. I considered the question carefully. I regret the lying, I said finally. Not because it hurt my parents, though it did, but because it hurt us. Living a double life meant neither life was fully authentic. And the marriage itself. Any regrets there? I leaned over to kiss him softly. Not for a single second. You're the best decision I ever made. As the sun set over Boston, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I reflected on the lessons of the past 3 years. I had learned that authenticity requires courage, the courage to be seen for who you truly are, even by those who may not approve. I had learned that family can be both the people who share your DNA and the people who share your values and vision for life. Most importantly, I had learned that living truthfully, even when painful, creates space for genuine connection and growth that hiding never can. I think we're going to be okay, I said, leaning my head against Andrew's shoulder. We already are, he replied simply. In that moment, watching the sunset with my husband, I felt completely at peace for the first time in years. The journey had been difficult, the confrontations painful, but the freedom of living an integrated, authentic life was worth every moment of struggle. I was finally whole, no more hiding, no more pretending, no more secret wedding, just Jessica and Andrew, building a life of love and truth together, one day at a time. If you've ever felt you had to hide parts of yourself to be accepted by your family, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did you find the courage to live authentically? Has anyone else kept a major secret from their family out of fear of their reaction? Please subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that choosing their own happiness isn't selfish, it's essential. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, living your truth may be difficult, but it's the only path to genuine happiness and peace.